Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello everybody. I am making this video recording in order to talk about a very important issue related to training and internship, especially for those who graduate from the university, fresh graduates, try to find their own careers, their own opportunities, and in many cases they find the doors just shut. For that reason, I'm making this recording Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello everybody. My name is Muhammad. I am a translator. I also study on the PhD level. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello everybody. My name is Muhammad. I'm doing some research on court interpreting. I am myself a translator and interpreter, but this recording has to do with an issue that I found very important to talk about. Very recently, just a few days ago, I noticed that some of my colleagues and friends are talking about difficulties in finding their ways through different channels in order to reach the career of translation or interpreting. Most often, students and Hello everybody. Welcome to this video. My name is Muhammad. I am a translator and Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello everybody and welcome to this video. My name Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello everybody and welcome to this video. My name is Muhammad. I am a translator, an interpreter, and a trainer. At the same time, I am doing some research on court interpreting. However, this recording has nothing to do with court interpreting at the moment. It has been recorded because I wanted to address a very important issue. Before I talk about this issue, before I raise it even, I would like just to share with you something that happened a week ago with me. This is a personal experience. 10 days ago, maybe a week or 10 days, I don't remember. Unusually, I went outside my home very early in the morning. I went to work, and when I reached my place of work, on the street I find just two people watching a kitten, and they were talking to each other. I asked them what they are doing. It is a very small kitten, and they say that it seems to be that she lost her mother, and they are afraid about her because she's moving across the street. She's very small, and it's very likely that cars will not see this kitten, and they are afraid that she would simply be killed by any car or by people who cannot see her. When looking at her, we find something worrying about her. Her eyes were making certain discharge, like pus, and the little experience and knowledge I know about the feline tells me that this cat has something relevant to the Callice virus. This is a virus that's fatal to the health of cats, and usually cats simply cannot make it. I decided at that time to go and help her and to find some vet. I took her in my car and went to the vet when the vet was open. That was in fact after I left my work at 5 o'clock. And I was shocked when the lady there told me that it is almost very late. It's very late, at a very late stage for the cat to live, and she will not make it. Her eyes, unfortunately, she has lost her vision. She cannot see with her eyes because of the pus and because of other complications. She had obviously some abscess inside her eyes, preventing her from seeing anything. Now, the reason I'm citing this story is because when I searched in the internet, I just turned on my computer and did some Googling on internet to see what this virus is about. And I found that whenever the cat has abscess in her eyes, it means that she's going to be blind for the rest of her life if she makes it. And it's very weird that I read something about a person who would say that in such circumstances, usually it would be better to end the struggle and pain of the kitten by some kind of what some people call mercy killing. It's just to take her life and that's it, to end everything. But at that time I thought about it in a different way. That cat was eating. She wanted to eat something. And when I offered her food, she just eats. She doesn't have any problem in eating. So I thought to myself that this cat is weak, yes. This cat is ill, yes. This cat is incapable of defending herself or helping herself. Yes, but she still wants to live. She still wants to survive. And maybe one application of this story is that even weak people, even if they are weak, we cannot simply just shut the doors for them. This is something that has touched me to the bottom of my heart, in fact. Especially when you think about humans who are in the same circumstances, that they need some help and nobody's helping them. Anyway, that's just the beginning of the story for an icebreaker, and this is a sad story, but the good part of the story is that the cat has survived, at least physically. Yes, she had some problems now with the eyes, and I'm sending her to the vet from time to time in order to give her certain injections and antibiotics in order to help her cope with the new life that she's having without the eyesight. But going back to our discussion, back to the issue that I am recording this video for, I'm talking about internship and the training. A few days ago, I noticed that many people are asking for training in translation. And what happens is that a person graduates from the university, or maybe he is a student at the university, or maybe he is just a translator. He's beginning to work as a translator. And this person is going somewhere in order to get some experience. Why does he need the experience? Because he goes to a company and he says, I want to work with you. I want just to apply for a position, to apply for the job, vacancy, whatsoever. And they would say, where is your experience? And one way of getting the experience is simply to get trained at some company or office or whatsoever. The scenario happens, as I was told by my friends at least, and many trainees, is that they go to the company and the company would say, sorry, we do not have any space for or place for training. So this person goes to another place, and they go to another place, and then they move from one place to another. But it seems to be that there is no point for doing anything like that. Another scenario is that they usually get accepted sometimes by certain companies. They say, well, we accept you to be training in our facility. But what happens is that from the very beginning, when the trainer or the mentor, or call him whatever you want to call, finds that this person is having certain weaknesses or demonstrating certain weaknesses, whether in language, whether in translation or whatsoever, what happens is that they say, okay, yes, we can accept you, but we can give you this piece to translate, and this is our translation, that's all. This can be anything but training, because training has to do in its most part with what we call feedback, and it's going to be constructive feedback. So this is counterproductive because it's frustrating and disappointing for the person who is getting this training. And what happens in this scenario is that the person who gets the training in this way, oftentimes what happens is that he's frustrated and he would say, okay, I no longer care, and I would just take a certificate that I have been trained, that's all. So you see the ambition. This person used to think like this, like big, like this, and now he is thinking like this, simply because he was frustrated and disappointed. Now this is the second scenario. The third scenario, which is the worst even, it is when you are accepted as a trainee in the company, and when you get there and you are very energetic and you want to do something, what happens though is that they give you some legal text, contracts, some insurance policies whatsoever, and all of them are full with terminology, and all of them needs to be analyzed, to be understood in order to be translated. They look simply like hieroglyphic to the untrained eyes, like the trainees. So there is certainly a gap, there is certainly a problem. What I am doing now is that I am asking trainees all the time to give me two things. First of all, when you go to a company, what are your hopes? What are the hopes that you want to get from this company if you get a training there? And the second thing is, what are the fears? What are the things that you fear to happen to you? And also you can talk about your own life. If you want to be a translator, what are your hopes and what are your fears? For example, you want to get an income, you want to get a family, you want to make a living. These are some of the hopes. But the fears that something, some difficulties might just come up along the road. When you go to the company, you may find some obstacles and you may simply be frustrated and simply be kicked out from the company. In this video, what I'm doing is that I collected the hopes and fears from some of our friends, and I would like now to talk about them and to visualize them, to just put them like a picture or whatsoever, like a diagram, which we call it a diagram, and try to see what kind of intervention we can do. What happens is that if somebody is not going to solve our problem, let's try to be part of the solution. Let us try to see if we can make any solution whatsoever. But anyway, what I am going to say is just going to be my opinion, my personal opinion. I'm sorry. And this opinion starts with the following premise, with the following opinion, which is it is that whenever a person graduates from the university with a degree in translation, this person has a certificate, and this certificate is a license, whether we like it or not. And whatever this person is, whatever background he has, whatever weaknesses we have, whatever strength he has, this person deserves all the attention. He is part of society, but more importantly, he has a certificate. Even if he is getting his certificate with a grade of satisfactory, with good, with very good, excellent, even if he is very weak, even if he is making rudimental mistakes in grammar, we have to understand that since this person has a certificate, we have no other option but to respect at least the certificate or the institution that gave this student this certificate. This is very ethical, this is my opinion. Whenever somebody is holding a degree in translation, I have to respect him, and I have to understand that he has something. He has something, and I have to help him this way. If I do not respect him as a person who has a certificate, at least as a human being, this is the lesson that we have to learn in our lives, is that we respect each other as humans and try to extend help to each other and not to make things difficult for each other. What happens, as I said from the very beginning, is that unfortunately the situation doesn't seem to be this idealistic. It's even far from being idealistic. We hear about terrible stories that people talk when they say that, first of all, we do not have any opportunity to be trained or to get any internship. And many people who made it into the company, they just make few steps inside, and just a few days later they were frustrated because of ignorance or because of their own mistakes. Maybe they don't know how to write, maybe they are very confused, and still the employer or whatsoever is not patient enough with them in order to take them to the safe side. In the third scenario that I talked about is that the trainer or the employer is very enthusiastic and he wants to train the trainee, but unfortunately he does that in the wrong way. He just gives him very difficult tasks. In other words, the employer is seeing the trainee as a person who is drowning in the sea. So he says, I will just give him a rope in order to help him. What happens is that when he is throwing the rope, he is hanging him and not helping him to the land of safety. We do not want these scenarios to happen. In order for this to happen, we have to take into consideration two things. First of all, what is the perspective of the trainer, which is the employer on the one hand, and what is the perspective of the trainees? What is the perspective of a trainee who wants to join this training? We need also to see what are the aspirations of the trainees compared with the expectations of the employer. Are there any sort of gaps between them? Is there any match between them? Do they get close to each other, or do you think, for example, that what the trainee is thinking about is unattainable from the perspective of the employer, and what the employer is demanding to be made by the trainee is impossible to be made? Or maybe the trainee himself would think that the employer is asking him to do trivial things that would not take him anywhere in the translation career. These thoughts and others will be discussed here in this video, and hopefully I will get your feedback about that. Now, finally, before I go directly to the discussion of the fears and hopes that I have received from you, please just take this video recording as a kind of an attempt on my part just to be part of the solution. I'm just setting a theoretical framework, and in many cases we know that theoretical frameworks can apply, and we know that this process, this systematic process, has proven effective and efficient in some other disciplines, but not necessarily to solve all problems in the world. It can solve, however, some important problems, and the main problem that it can solve is that to see things in a visualized manner, to see them in a new perspectives, and to see the things from the eyes of the trainees and from the eyes also of the employers or trainers. Without much ado, I will now move directly to the point, to the diagram, and we will see what you have given to us. It's going to be written in Arabic, but I'm going still to talk in English. And the reasons that I am talking in English, although the context is Arabic, it is because maybe somebody would hear us and maybe he can offer us such solutions that could be helpful for us in the Arab world. Let's go now to the diagram, and I will just make some final comments at the end. This table or this document that you are going to see now is pre-recorded, so I'm just going to comment on what's there. As you can see in the document, you have the fears and hopes that I have extracted from the comments that I saw in the group of translators that we are in the Facebook. Now, what I'm going to do is to categorize them. In other words, I want to see what things have to do with work and employment, what things have to do with learning, what things have to do with education. Let's see just in a moment. Before that, I would like just to point your attention to the important fact that, unfortunately, I just forgot to write it in English, and it's already pre-recorded. It's in Arabic, not in English. I'm sorry for that. And the reason I'm speaking in English because in many cases we fail to get good solutions for our problems because we need it sometimes to think in the English way. And for that reason we speak in English, because they say if you want to think in English, just speak as if you were English, and the vice versa. If you want to speak English, think in the way that the English do. As you can see here, I'm dividing that into several categories. The first one is employment, and the second one is training. You will see that certain items can go to different categories, and this is going to be intentional. Once we put the items in the right places, or we suggest them to be in those places, we will try to see what kind of intervention we can do in order to make things better. And this is just an opinion, as I said. After that we will move to something else, but let's see. Now here I'm trying to group them into several categories in order to see how they are related. We have training and we have education. The difference between training and education is that education means that you learn something new, something that you haven't known before. This is education. Training, on the other hand, is something else. It's how to apply the knowledge that you have already known so that you can develop the skill. This is the main difference between education and training as far as translation is concerned. You have a variety of good input that I have from you, and they are really excellent comments that you have made about the fears and hopes that people have when they want to get trained by centers, and they want to leave the university, they want to graduate, and they want to have their own careers. By the way, speaking to the mic is a bit tense, and this explains why I'm not feeling sometimes comfortable talking to the mic or to the computer. Anyways, we're now filling in the spaces, filling in the gaps. And you can see that, for example, in education, many of you said that they don't have terms, words, terminology, etc. This is what we say, repertoire of vocabulary. This is what I wrote in Arabic. The other things have been implicitly or explicitly said by you. For example, you said that the translation job goes always to freelance translators from another country. I put it here to see if it is a founded fear or not. And some people talked about the awkwardness of translation, but for the purposes of this diagram that we're going to draw up in just a moment, I'm saying it's called translation quality. So there's fear concerning the quality of translation. Some of you said about a certificate for training. It is very important for a person to get a certificate of training. And here I think we have to say, instead of saying certificate, why don't we say certification? In other words, it's any proof. A proof that somebody is trained, a proof that somebody has received adequate training in order to do something. Those areas belonging to each group, I will try to find one of them. Each group, I will try to single out one that I consider to be the most important. We will first of all finish this one and then try to see what we can do. Income is very important because people want to get money at the end of the day. Once again, I want to explain this. What we're doing is trying to visualize the picture, to see what's happening in visualized form. In order to do that, first of all, I got your input and then I classify them into several issues, and then I try to see which one affects the other and how we can make interventions. Not being committed, not being serious, we cannot put them in a negative way. We have to put it in the positive way. This is what I am doing here. And I'm combining them into one subgroup, which is something like perceptions, because usually trainees get perceptions that might be different from the expectations of the employers or trainers. Now, by the way, one of the most difficult issues about training is that the trainee goes to the training center or to the company and tries to learn something new there, while the company says we cannot teach you anything new, you have to practice the skills. So the first one, which is about work and employment, I chose the word income as the main seed for the diagram. So the most important thing about employment is an income, because you want to get income, you want to get money. Then as far as training is concerned, we just have another seed, which is to prove that you are able to translate. This is what I chose. And this is a hypothesis, because I have to make a hypothesis given the fact that I couldn't meet with you to know what kind of ideas you will have about the important seeds of the groups that we have in the tables. In education, we have knowledge. This is what I'm going to highlight as a seed, and then we will move now to the diagram. I would like now to move to the connection circles that I have just made. It's pre-recorded as well, but in order for us to understand what I am doing, I want to cite an example from the internet in order to explain the situation. What we have here in this example is that there is a problem, and we try to solve this problem by seeing the connections between the elements, which we call variables. On the right here, on the right corner, we see that we have concern about health risks. Now this is the first issue. On the other side, there is the French fries eaten, and then we have the number of restaurants, fast food restaurants. So basically we try to see three elements, maximum three elements, and put them and try to see the connections between them. Now here the connection is as follows. We have concern about health risk. In other words, that the Ministry of Health is very dead worried about the health of the citizens because people eat fats all the time. Why do they eat fats? It's because the number of fast food restaurants is increasing. Let's now move to the second circle and see how it evolves. In the second circle, we see that after we have put the seeds in the map, we try to understand the intermediary variables between them. For example, what happens here is that when we have more fast food restaurants, what happens is that more fries are sold, and when there is more fries are sold, and it happens that the fat consumption increases, and the fat consumption comes as a result not only of selling the fries, but also from eating the fries after it is sold. When fat consumption increases, what happens is that more people are concerned about the health risks. Let's move to the next circle. In the next circle, we have other connections explained. It says that when the country is very worried about health risks because of the consumption of the fat, what happens? It decreases the French fries sold. This arrow means it decreases. It passes on regulations, for example, or whatsoever. And when it decreases French fries sold, in other words, it's decreasing the French fries eaten. When French fries eaten is decreased, then fat consumption decreases, and this decreases the health risks. On the other hand, we have another circle which says that when more numbers of restaurants, when we have more fast food restaurants, what happens is that they sell more fries. And when they sell more fries, what happens is that they make more profits. They use part of their profits in increasing the number of their restaurants. And the loop continues in this way. So this is a reinforcement loop. It's very important to put this diagram and to visualize this connection because of the following reason. If we want to solve the problem here on this level, on the level of concern about health risk, about the public risk, for example, we will look into the regulations and we ask ourselves the question, can we really pass on a law? If we pass a law to restrict the number of fast foods, then it's over. The number of fast food restaurants is going to be cut off, and for that reason we will have less fat consumed by people, which means that people will not be as ill as they are in the present day. But there is a problem with passing the law. Passing the law means that, first of all, it takes a long time, and it may have problems with the investment law or with the antitrust law, or etc. Or maybe there are conventions, agreements that cannot accept such a law. So where do we go? Maybe we go to the fat consumption, and we try to convince people that fat consumption is very bad for them. In order to do that, we can hold campaigns, we can launch campaigns, awareness campaigns among people, telling them about the problems and the harmful effects of consuming fat. It is easy, it can be done maybe in 1 week, but what about the effect? The effect is going to be very weak as well. It's not as strong as the law. So on the one hand, we have here, on the government level, we have the possibility of having a law with a very high consequence if it happens, because it will restrict the number of fast food restaurants, and this will decrease the French fries sold, this will decrease the French fries eaten, and then it will certainly decrease the fat consumption. But the problem here is that while the consequences are very high, are very effective, it's very difficult to make it because laws are not very easy to be made. On the other side, on the other extreme, we have the awareness campaigns. While launching an awareness campaign is very easy, still the consequences are very low as well, because it's very difficult to convince people. Even if you convince them that fat consumption is bad for health, you will likely see people just eating more and more. By the same token, if we go to our diagram, and I'm just going in a minute, what happens here is that I took the notes that you have mentioned and which we extracted into the table and chose 3 of them as main components of the diagram. I chose demonstrated ability in translation, I chose knowledge, and I chose income. There's also practical experience. Those things, we have to increase them. We have to increase ability in translation. We have to increase knowledge in order to increase, at the end of the day, the income. Let's see these connections. This is a hypothetical diagram, by the way, and it would have been better if I met with you and discussed that issue with you so that you can give me more connections. But anyway, this is a sample in order for us to see the point that I'm going to target, to the point that I want to pass on to you. So basically what happens is that it is a matter of win or lose. This is what we think, this is what we perceive. We say that if you go to the training center, and this is our problem, you either win the job or lose it. Win the opportunity or lose it. The door is open or the door is shut. However, if you look at the situation in a different way, like a diagram like this one, we will see that we can solve the problem in different ways, or maybe we can see other solutions. Maybe the problem is not like the one that we have seen. So basically, as I said, we have 3 stocks here. We have demonstrated ability in translation, and we have knowledge, and we have practical experience. These are the main things that we want to increase. And if we increase them, at the end of the day, we will increase our income. In other words, we will live a very happy life. Why did I choose those 3 stocks? It's just hypothetical. Usually I sit with people when I make such diagrams in order to solve any problem. In translation training, I usually sit with the students and facilitate the session by eliciting information from them. I never interfere and never hypothesize anything. I just get information from them and ask about their opinion. But here, because I haven't met with you on this session, it was hypothetical, so I make a hypothesis that the most important thing that we need to do is to get more knowledge and to demonstrate our ability in translation and to get practical experience, ultimately to achieve more income. And I took other points and threw them on the diagram and then try to see the connections and try to see which influences what. Let's take something which is not obvious. Clarity of goals. Is it important to have clarity of goals when you want to go to the translation center? Do you just go to the center and say, I just want to be trained and that's all? Or do you need to be clear on your goals? Now, when you are clear on the goals, according to this hypothetical diagram, what will happen? See what will happen. If you have clarity of the goals, the clearer on the goals you are, the more serious and commitment you're going to be. Because if you are accepted for the job, what happens is that you have clear goals and you know exactly what you want to do. You know exactly what you are committed to do. For that reason, you are taking it very seriously. And the more you take it seriously and the more committed you are to the goals, what happens is that you perform the translation work effectively. So this is the point. Clear goal leads to seriousness and commitment. And by the way, these are your words. I got them from the table. Seriousness and commitment lead to performing better translation work. And performing translation work, what happens if you translate more work today and tomorrow and after tomorrow? I hypothesize that your exposure to different texts is going to increase. Now, what happens when you are exposed to more text? The more text you translate, the more diversity of text types you have. Legal, economic, media, etc. And the more diversity you have, what happens here? It has to do with a difficult job. Your job becomes more difficult. And when your job becomes more difficult, it affects the translation quality. I think this arrow, I should have made it red because it decreases translation quality when the difficult job is there. Anyway, if the translation quality increases, however, what happens is that your practical experience increases as a stock. And when your practical experience increases, what happens to you? You get sustainability and stability of the job, because the employer will be happy with you and will keep you there to work for him. Now, sustainability and stability means that you work tomorrow and after tomorrow and after tomorrow, and then it increases your knowledge. If your knowledge increases, what happens? I hypothesize that your employer is going to be happy with you because you have knowledge of the ethics, knowledge of the know-how of the job, etc. And when he is happy, what happens is that your ability of translation is going to be better, and so forth. When you have better ability in translation, you are better in marketing yourself. When you are marketing yourself better, it means you have better opportunities for remote work. And when you have better opportunities, you receive more assignments. When you receive more assignments, you are exposed to more text. It takes you then to translation of different text. But translation of diverse text leads you to committing errors in translation. Here is a problem. When you commit errors in translation, however, this also increases feedback from the trainer. And if the feedback from the trainer increases to you, it helps you in performing good quality. So you see, this is the basic diagram. At the end of the day, we still have a problem with this diagram because it's hypothetical and still it's not finalized, because I have to link it later on to the income, how the income increases at the end of the day. As you can see, it's a bit broken here, the diagram, because usually it takes 3 to 4 hours with the students in order to make it. Now let's look at another loop here. For example, company's cost. If you have more cost for the company has to spend more money. What happens? The employer is unable to pay, and when he is unable to pay, he outsources more work from other countries. And when the employer gets work from other countries done, then the assignment that you receive gets little smaller, and when they get smaller, your exposure to text is going to be smaller, and the whole loop is going to be reduced. So the less assignments you have, what happens with the arrow here, the less exposure to the text, the less translation of the text, the less errors you make in the translation, but because of not working, you do not get feedback from the mentor, you do not get translation quality, etc. How should we use now this diagram? We should use it by answering the question, is it necessary just to go to a training center and get training there in order to know about the job? In fact, not necessarily. Let's take any of these elements. Let's take, for example, let's take the exposure of text. As you can see now, exposure of text has a direct influence on this one, and on a series of other subsequent issues like the diamond effect. And this is the question. This is the conclusion, first of all, is that when you are more exposed to the text, you get better results in the future. Better results here, and this affects this one, etc., etc., until the end. Exposure to text, is it necessary to be done in the center of training? Is it easy? Is it difficult? What is the likelihood and what is the consequence? The capability of exposure to the text is very high, because you're able to browse your internet and to be exposed to any text you like in the world. So it's at ease to you. It's very easy to be exposed to them. What about the consequence? The consequence is moderate to high, because it affects other factors. It makes you better to understand the text, better to understand other issues, so that they are going to be helpful to you when you work in translation. So this is something that you do not necessarily need to do in this training center. You can do it elsewhere. Exposure to text. Naturally, when you are trained in the center, you will be exposed to the text. But remember, this one is not important. This one is not important here, because you can do it somewhere else. I will come back to this point later on. Let's take another issue. We need you to market yourself in order to get more jobs from people. Can you do that or not? Now, this has nothing to do with the training. This would lead at the end of the day to having an income, to be exposed to the text, to have income, etc. from this diagram. But this does not necessarily have to be done inside the training center. It can happen by, for example, getting connections with the support groups on Facebook or whatsoever. It can happen through other things as well. Now, what about translation quality? Translation quality comes from feedback from the mentor. Here, this is the point that you need a mentor. You cannot improve your translation quality according to this diagram unless you get feedback from the mentor. And here I can agree with you, you need to be trained there. Let's move to something else. I'm asking about this one now, the cost of desk work. We understand that if you go to a training center, there is desk work to be done, and it's very expensive. And when it's very expensive, the company's cost or overhead increases. And this, at the end of the day, increases the company's outsourcing of other translators from other countries. Here is the question. This one, we have to decrease this one. How to decrease it? The cost. What about going to the training center and telling him that I do not want at the beginning to work as a translator? Why don't I help you with issues related to translation? For example, your translators are already working on the translation of the Arab Bank annual report of 2019. And they have found that it's very similar to the annual report of 2016. But they don't have the time to go there to 2016. At the same time, the company, the training center, which is a company as well, does not have the financial capability of appointing another translator in order just to see the differences and similarities between the annual reports. What is the solution here? The solution is that we can offer the solution by saying the training center, if you assign to me as a trainee the desk work that the translator cannot do, I can reduce the cost here. I can reduce the cost, the company's cost. And this will increase your affordability. If the employer agrees to your suggestion and you work with his minor tasks or assignments, like for example building term bases, building memories, comparing and contrasting documents whatsoever, if you do them at low cost for him, it will increase his affordability, and at the end of the day it will give him more money in order to use his own translators, to give them overtime, to give you even yourself work in translation, because you are helping him with other issues. And this means that he will decrease the outsourcing of translators from other countries. Now we have other issues about knowledge, for example. About knowledge. Knowledge is affected by repertoire of vocabulary. This is according to the diagram. Of course, this is just a basic one. It has to be refined and revised several times. As I said, it takes about 3 hours, and then it has to be revised after 3 days or 4 days, etc. If you increase your vocabulary, you increase your knowledge, and knowledge increases employer satisfaction. Employer satisfaction increases, etc., 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 until you reach the income. Of course, it's not here clear that it increases income because the diagram still has to be revised. But let's assume that it goes through the chain until the income. Do you necessarily have to restrict your learning of the new words just inside the training center, or can you do it outside it? In fact, even if you are not employed, even if you are not training at the training center, you can do this. Let's say that you haven't got a chance to be trained anywhere in the world. At least if you improve your vocabulary according to this diagram, then you are improving your knowledge. And when you improve your knowledge, it goes through the chain to other issues. It helps at least to do something. We have the exposure of text types, as I said. We explained that, performing translation work, and we have the feedback from the mentor. The only problem that we have is feedback from the mentor. If you don't have a feedback from the mentor, you will have a problem in assuring your translation quality. So this, when you have feedback from the mentor and you know how to assure yourself of the quality, it goes back once again to the clarity of goals. Although we don't have this arrow here, but anyway, it affects the clarity of goals. It tells you exactly what you expect from the training center, and it tells the employer or the trainer what kind of expectation does he have about you. I have tried in this diagram to explain my point. I hope that it's understood. If you have any question, maybe we can make a session just for that. We can build it together. I have tried to build this diagram before with another group of translators, and it worked perfectly with them about something totally different, and it worked, and it was full of insight just because there was a kind of participation between the various people involved in that training. Now, my point, this is the bottom line that we have, is that this is the diagram. You try to clarify the goals that you have and all points that are at play in the training of translators. And the point is that once you change something, it can change the whole system. One conclusion is that, first of all, we have to have clear goals when we go to the training center. And second, we can talk to the training center that we do not need to give us full training for everything. And you do not need, in fact, to train us on the text or the text types, etc. why don't you hire us only for certain administrative work, desk work that can be helpful to you? We can assist your translators, for example, in order to reduce the cost. It's going to be a win-to-win case. Well, I hope it gives you some kind of an understanding of the way that I think about the structure and the system thinking model here of the issue of training. If you have any questions, just please put it in the comment, and I will be very pleased to answer it. Even if we need to allocate a specific time for the session in order to draw it together, I'll be ready to do so. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.